Hey, Friend Church D coming at you once again. Thanks for tuning into What Does It Take to Win? On this episode, we're going to be talking about our issues, our problems, and our troubles. But it's not that type of episode. No, in all seriousness, we're just going to be discussing our issues and how we should be dealing with them. If you want to be successful, you need to be able to solve your issues. You need to be able to sit down, look your issues in the face and say, hey, I can solve you. You're not going to solve me, if you will. Let's dive right in. As always, I try to give you all 3 points to focus on in order to apply them to solving any situation, any issue that may arise. But first, I just want to say, let's not ignore our issues. We have to find a solution for them, as I mentioned opening. How do we do this? Well, my advice and something I've done like growing up, even as a teenager and into like my early 20s and even up until now, I would just sit down and make a list of all of my troubles. And it's not necessarily like a trouble or an issue that I have, but let's say it's certain things I have to deal with, like, I don't know, like my student loan debt or like just daily tasks that I have to take care of. I would sit down, make a list, and just check them off as I solve each task one by one. So that's, my advice to whoever's listening to this. You can make either a mental list, just kind of keep it in your memory, like, okay, I need to take care of these few things for the next few days, or write it down, type it in your phone, put it on your computer, whatever it may be, however you can see it. If you need to visualize it, if you're more of a visual person, definitely write it out and just go through, cross out everything that you've taken care of one by one. Okay. But let's jump right into it. This shouldn't be too long of an episode unless you want it to be. Then you can write me and say, hey, make a longer episode. I'm just goofing off right now. But yeah, let's jump right into it. So I listed 3 points. The first point is basically saying, do not ignore your issues. The second point is don't delay in solving your issues or your problems. And the third point is you'll finally get to see that, hey, it wasn't so bad after all. Okay. So let's jump into the first point. So ignoring your issues. This is like a cancer to problems. If you ignore your issues, it sort of blossoms into bigger issues bit by bit. For example, let's say you have garbage in your house. All right. Your garbage can has filled up because you didn't take your trash out for the week. Are you going to continue adding garbage to that pile and just cover it up with like a black sheet or something? I don't think so. That garbage will be sky high. It will smell really bad in there. It will begin to attract flies, and then it can just be the breeding ground for all things filthy. You don't want that. If you ignore your problems, that's the same effect that you're going to have. Let's say you have beef with somebody, like, you got issues and you're just going to try to ignore them and every time you see them. You could do that. I mean, if you don't have to interact with them, you could ignore them. But if you have to interact with them, you might want to sit them down and say, look, we have issues, buddy, and we need to solve them. Now, if they're the type of person that doesn't want to communicate and solve issues, then by all means, yeah, you kind of have to do what you got to do. But that's a different situation that, it can be dealt with differently. Don't ignore your issues because it will cause even bigger issues. Another example, let's talk about, our health. Let's say you get a cut on your hand. Are you going to just ignore that cut? No. If you ignore it, it can get infected or it's going to hurt every time water or something with alcohol in it touches it. No, you got to clean the cut, put some sort of ointment on the cut, put a bandage on it and let it heal. Address that issue. Okay. Let's move on to my second point. Do not delay in solving your issues. Now, this kind of goes hand in hand. It almost sounds like don't ignore your issues, but do not delay. A lot of us, including myself, we tend to delay solving certain issues due to fear. Yeah. And that's kind of hard to admit sometimes because we like to go around like we're all macho and nothing scares us and we're just superhumans. But the reality of it is we all deal with a certain level of fear that we must overcome. And this fear can delay you in solving your issues. Don't allow it to do so. I'll give you another example. Let's say you want to talk to somebody. Let's say you're in high school, right? And you have a crush on this person and you want to ask them to prom or something. Let's say you want to talk to them and time is ticking away. Prom is within 2 weeks. And every day you tell yourself, okay, I'm going to go up there and I'm going to talk to them. And then it just creeps up. And then finally, there's only 3 days till prom. You don't have a date. They don't have a date. And the person that you're in competition with doesn't have a date. So now what are you going to do? Are you going to keep telling yourself, hey, I'm going to do it tomorrow until time runs out and then you go to prom solo? Or are you going to deal with your issues and conquer your fear and say, hey, let me talk to this person and see if they have a date for prom? That was a bit of a rant. I almost feel like I was talking about myself in high school, but we won't go there. Actually, I'm not going to go there. Let me stop right now. But yeah, don't let the fear cause you to delay solving your issues. Another thing that can cause is anxiety or panic. And let me tell you, that's like the worst feeling ever. When your heart starts beating fast out of nowhere and you're like, oh, what's going on? Like, why does my chest feel like it's caving in, you know? You don't want that to happen. And once you solve your issues, and this is going to like kind of segue into my third and final point. Once you solve your issues, you'll find out that it really wasn't that bad after all. I'll use myself as an example again. I had to actually speak with somebody regarding a certain circumstance. And, you know, this person, we're not close or anything, but I've worked with them on a few different occasions. And, you know, I kind of look at them as somebody who believed in me and kind of went against the grain to help me get to where I was, you know, like even presently. So I kind of been putting off, you know, like I just mentioned before, I kind of been putting off talking with them because I was a little leery about how they would take it, or, you know, whatever answer they would give me. So finally I got up and as I was getting up, I was saying to myself, oh my God, what's happening right now? Why am I getting up? What am I doing? What am I going to say? Where am I going? It was like my body had just taken over and my mind's like, wait a minute. No, I need to process this. But I got up, you know, walked over to them, pulled them to the side. I said, hey, you know, can we chat up just for a little bit? You know, I have a few things I just want to say to you and ask you. And I thought it was going to be like at the end of the day, but they were actually ready to do it right then, during that moment. And we just talked it through and it was actually not bad at all. In fact, it went by better than I anticipated it to be. So that was a plus, you know, that was a big weight off of my shoulders. But the entire time leading up to it, it was almost like I was scaring myself or giving myself like anxiety or like panic, anticipating what could go wrong. But in the end, God had my back, as always. That's another thing, too. You know, I keep giving you guys bonus points. But here's a fourth point. Just rest assured that God always has your back when you're going to solve any type of issue or if you have to deal with your troubles. Believe it or not, God really does have your back. As mentioned before, I've been in many situations in which I started getting frantic and freaking out over like things that I thought were out of my control. And in the end, the way it all played out was so crazy. I would just watch it like, wow, there was no need for me to even freak out at all. So yeah, just know that God really does always have your back, especially when you have like certain issues and whatnot to solve, or if you're going to be in certain situations that you're kind of fearful about or kind of leery about putting yourself in. If you feel like you're taking on too much work, whatever the case may be, you could have your hand in just about any and every project, stretching yourself too thin. Just know that God's going to have your back. That was my little inspirational rant at the end. But yeah, you know, we got to solve our issues. We can't just ignore them. And once we finally solve them and reach a resolution, we can just sit back and say to ourselves like, wow, that really wasn't that big of a deal. I don't know why I was getting all bent out of shape over these minor issues that I had to deal with, especially when God had my back the entire time. So let's do a quick recap of, the 4 points that we spoke about. Starting from the top, though, as I had mentioned, how do we solve our issues? Well, a great way to start is you have to make a list, whether it's a physical list or a mental checklist. Make a list and cross every issue or problem off the list one by one as you solve it. So now that we know how to start, the first point is ignoring your issues will cause a bigger one. So do not ignore your issues. That's the first point. The second point, don't delay in solving your issues. Don't put it off, because you might put it off for one day and then one day turns into months. Months turn into years and so on. Finally, once they are solved, you'll realize that, hey, these issues weren't that bad. They weren't that difficult to solve after all. And finally, last but not least, always remember that God has your back, no matter what. Thank you for all of your time today. Thanks for tuning in to this podcast. I hope it blessed you. I hope it encouraged you. I hope it inspired you. Hey, if you like it, be sure to click the share button and subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can find me on YouTube at Church D. Check out my website. I'll put the link in the description below. And until next time, thanks for tuning in.